to show you how to open the. If I'm not here one morning, just take it out.
Okay.
Take it out.
Every day?
No, plug it in there. I'll show you how to do it. Come, I'll show you. Stay on when you charge it, doesn't it?
I will declare this fire and take it
Why is there Rabbeinu? No, what's two differences?
This, I can get up like that. Put it away. The way I put it away, so it doesn't hurt no one. Put it over here. See this.
Look at you.
Ready?
Very nice.
Simple enough?
Beautiful. And this stays on all the time?
No, I turned it on. On my phone, right? I wasn't driving, I just turned everything on. It was already live, why don't you go? It's the way to do it.
So no
right?
laptops, no iPads, nothing.
And guess what? See that thing?
You said it's going to open and close or something?
Yeah,
Getting a pulley?
My brother knows actuators and all the thing. We put it together, Wi-Fi. Hopefully it's going to work out. Let's see. Okay, this heat wants to the church. Okay.
guess. I don't know.
Thank you. Especially for the snow. Schön gemacht. Okay, I want to welcome Rabbi Krieger from Eretz Yisrael. He was with us the whole time, but virtually. Yeah, we're going to learn Abchanin is going to koyanim. I just felt, Shloshim Yom Chaydam Achag. Okay. Thank you for making all the copies. It's much easier. Darf sich nicht anstrengen, also. Ah? No. It's very small words. Okay, so now we go to the next step. We're on Samach Daled, column 1, 3 lines from the bottom. V'hine mevur be'idra Rabba. So one of the applications to life, based on what we explored previously, yesterday's shiur, about the tremendous tzimtzum, the filtering that is necessary to go from the world of seichel to the world of midos, and then from the world of midos to the world of dibur, from the world of awareness to the world of experience, or feeling, what we would call feeling, tangible feelings, from the world of feelings, internal feelings, to express it to somebody else. It's a process. It's not always just a seamless flow. And the process requires a tremendous transformation, which is what a tzimtzum is, a parsa, which is basically the light going through a partition and being transformed into a new reality. And as one of the applications that we discussed, and it's a very vital application, is a person has to be able to appreciate this and be sensitive to it. The fact that I know something is true, I'm aware of its truth, at least it's truth for me, and I'm extremely aware of it, but I don't feel it, meaning I don't experience it, what we would call, I'm not in the mood of it, or I'm not enthusiastic about it, I'm not gravitating to it, my body is not excited, my heart is not excited. It doesn't in any way mitigate, dilute, compromise, or take away from the truth of it. Very often a person looks at feelings as the barometer if something is right or something is wrong. I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, it's relevant, it's exciting to be excited, but that's what it is. It's just exciting to be excited. And if I'm not excited, so what? It just means that my body or a certain part of me couldn't now experience the full truth of that awareness. Sometimes the truth of that value, I'm not in a position where I can fully experience it. It hasn't yet been translated in the language that allows all of me to feel it. So I'll say, I feel it's the right thing to do, but I don't feel like doing it. Okay. So the right thing to do hasn't yet translated, it hasn't yet descended and gone through the tzimtzum that is necessary for your organism, for your body, let's say, to appreciate it on every level. It doesn't mean you're a hypocrite if you follow your true value, and it doesn't mean that the fact that you may feel otherwise in a tangible fashion delegitimizes everything else. And that's the process known as tzimtzum. You have to appreciate the fact that it's not just a straight flow. There's a trend, a new language, the language of awareness. The language of seichel is not the language of midas. Yeah, not automatically. Today, when you post something on YouTube, so they already have automatic translations. You can go to transcript, right? And you can have a translation in French and Russian and so forth. And even then, the inaccuracies are quite intense inaccuracies. It's not automatically everything gets translated into other languages, and even if it does, it's not a simple flow. Tzimtzum means a transformation is necessary to get it from this world into this world. Yeah, it may be now in the world of seichel, it's not in the world of midas. It didn't come into that world. Now we go to the next stage. V'hinei.
When I heard the word seichel, it always implied to me like someone has a lot of seichel. It means that they're sort of smart or they can think good.
That's not what we're referring to. We're referring to seichel here as the world of awareness, the world of what I know to be true. V'hinei mavur be'idra Rabba. It's explained in Idra Rabba. Ha'hefresh ben Chassidus the dikna, l'Chassidus the reisha. Idra Rabba is one of the famous sections of Zohar. Zohar is a commentary. Zohar is the foundational work of Kabbalah, of Nister, of Pnimi Satira. The Zohar is a commentary on the Parshas. Zohar Parshas Bereshis, Parshas Noach, Lech Lecha. Zohar Parshas Nosai, and Parshas Nosai deals with the laws of a Nazirite, a Nazir, who's commanded, who wants to become more holy and segregates himself or herself somewhat from the mundane aspects of life. So of course they don't drink wine or contaminate themselves in any way. And one of the unique mitzvahs of the Nazir is that the hair must remain untouchable. The hair of the head is allowed to grow long until the period of Nazirus is over, unless you have a concept in halacha called a Nazir Olam, which means a Nazir for life. The hair has to grow long, yeah. He can't cut his hair until the period of Nazirus is over. A Nazir Olam, but not a regular Nazir. Right. So this, in Zohar Parshas Nosei, that Parsha, there's a whole section called Idra Rabba. Idra Rabba means the great gathering. The word Idra is the Aramaic translation of the word Goyren. Ketrumas HaGoyren. The translation of Goyren is usually a granary, with a silo where they would keep grain, and it was set up in like semicircles. So this gathering was called the Idra. The Idra is, you had Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who was considered, he is the main character, the main teacher in the Zohar, the main personality in the Zohar, and he taught his children and many of the students who he called Chaverim, friends, Chavraya, his friends, his colleagues, the Tanoim who lived in his times, who were part of the inner group of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. One of these gatherings in which they sat like a semicircle, that's why it's called an Idra, it's called Idra Rabba, the great gathering. There's also a section in Zohar called Idra Zuta. Here it's Aleph Daled Reish, which is Idra Rabba. And like, this is one of the very complex and mystical sections of the Zohar, which is basically dedicated to describe much of the anatomy of the human organism, the human body, particularly the skull and the brain and the hair, and explaining it from a spiritual, mystical perspective, what it mirrors from a spiritual point of view, or to put it in different words in classic Kabbalistic language, what is its meaning in the divine source. And it's a very fascinating section in Zohar because it deals in details with the anatomy of the brain from a spiritual perspective. And as we know today, that probably one of the most exciting areas of discovery and wisdom is neuroscience, really exploring, mapping out what exists in our brains. And despite tremendous revelations and explorations that really show, and every day show more, the magnificence and extraordinary, dazzling brilliance and ingenuity of the brain, it's still clear to everybody that we haven't yet scratched the surface, because we can't even define what consciousness means, what remains an absolute mystery, what this brain has, what this brain contains. The fields of neuroplasticity are dazzling, and just the interactions of the neurons and the different hemispheres and parts of the brain, etc. Somebody just sent me a story. My son actually sent me a story a few days ago that he picked up from a newspaper in 1998. There was this fellow, a young man in his early 20s, who was suffering from terrible, terrible case of OCD. But one of the most exaggerated forms. He could take dozens of showers a day, wash his hands hundreds of times. It was really crippling. It was just overwhelming. He couldn't function. Real OCD, the person just never trusts anything. You could go check the door 600 times. You go to bed and then you go back, and all night you're checking the door, checking the windows, and it could be very, very severe. And he just gave up. It was a horrible life. And once he was talking to his mother. So his mother says, "What should I tell you? Go shoot yourself." No, she was probably joking. That's what he did. He went downstairs, there was a gun, he took the gun, and he shot himself. And obviously she heard the shots, or somebody heard the shots, and they called the ambulance, and his life was saved. They saved his life. But something else happened. He was cured. The man was almost completely cured. The bullet happened to affect the exact region of the brain that was responsible for his OCD. Today, I was reading about his life today. He's living a very successful life. He always had a certain dream that was crippled by his OCD, and he literally cured himself by trying to commit suicide. Huh? Now, I'm not telling anybody to try this as a solution to your problems, but it's just extraordinary. The guy was literally trying to kill himself, and he cured himself in the process.
He did kill that self.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes mother gives best advice, right? It's good to listen to your mother. It wasn't his trigger, it was his mother. So it's really the mapping out of the brain it's extremely exciting stuff. And what they're going to come up with, it's beyond what we can even imagine today. In Zohar over there, you see a glimpse of it. The Zohar really gets into the intricacies of the brain and its spiritual perspectives. That's the section called Idra Rabba. Idra Rabba. And that's what he's going to be quoting now in this next segment. It's a very, very mystical and riddle-like, code-like language, Idra Rabba. And much of it deals with, as I said, the brain and the skull and the hair on the head and the cranium and the hair of the beard and the hair of the payas. So he says, it says in Idra Rabba, Hefresh ben side is the dikna, l'side is the resha. Dikna is the Aramaic for a beard. Zaken, it's called dikna. Resha is the head. The Zohar says the difference between the hair that grows on the head and the hair that grows from the beard when the male matures. The dikna tkifun inun. The Cyrus, the dikna, the hair of the beard tkifun inun, are more dense, are more terse, are more tough. They're tkifin, from the word toikif, right? More, how would you call the fabric, the chemistry of the hairs of your beard? Huh? Dead? Yeah, no, he's talking about all the hairs, not all the hairs. The hairs of the beard are tkifin in, are more, they have like, thicker, yeah. Beside is the reish she'in, and the hairs of the head are she'in. She'in is softer. That's what the Idra Rabba says. What does the Zoya mean? Not just physically, the texture, that too, but he's saying that it's manifesting something deeper. Va'inyanu. The language here is going to be pretty new and novel and maybe alien, but it'll be clear. It'll be clear. V'inyanu. Kini hasaydes the dikna nikrayim lavush. The hairs of the beard, the hairs growing the beard, are called a lavush, a garment. Even though they're not a garment, they're here, but that's what they're called. Kamashakasov, lavushe kislag chiver. There's a verse in Daniel. Daniel tells us, and I quote, Atik yoimin Yosef. He said it in the beginning of the Maimer. Atik yoimin Yosef. The Ancient One in days sits. His garment is like white snow. The hair of his head is like fleece, like white wool. Levushe kislag chiver, usa'ar reisha kamar naka. His garment is like white snow, and the hair of his head is like white wool. Says the Idra Rabba, Levushe refers to Cyrus the Dikna, the hairs of the beard. Saresha is the hair on the head. The hair on the skull, on what we call the cranium, that is like white wool. So it's called Levush. The hairs of the beard is called Levush. Inside is the Dikna, Kamashakasa B'Idra Rabba. Kamay Mashal HaLevush, just like a garment. Shuba B'chinas Levush Nifrid V'Nivdal Me'atzmos Adam Legamri, which is completely separate from a person. When you want, you remove the garment, and when you want, you put back the garment. It's not intrinsic and innate to the human organism. You can take off your garment, you can don it. But then there's the hair on the head. That's not called a lavush. That's called sareshitz. Even though it's hair that's growing, and when we say hair that's growing, we know that it doesn't have within it blood vessels, it doesn't have within it nerves, and when you cut the hair, it doesn't cause pain to the person. But mikol makom yesh lahem chiyus v'yinika mebchinas pnimius hamaychad shabarosh. But still, the hair receives vitality. Yinika, it sucks, it absorbs from the energy of the pnimius hamaychad shabarosh, from that which is inside the head, the hair that grows on the head. Every hair has what it's called its root, its follicle, right? I think it's called a follicle. And I think a person has approximately 5 million strands of, average 5 million strands of hair on their body, which is quite an amount if you think about it. 5.5 million? Okay. You counted? You Googled or you counted? Google counted. You counted yourself. And each one has its root, its follicle, which when you pull it, it does hurt. When you cut the hair, it doesn't. When you pull the hair, it does hurt, because it's connected to the blood, and it receives what he calls chiyus and yinika from pnimius hamaychad shabarosh. Well, here he's talking about the hair on the head. So the hair on the skull. The brain, yeah, the brain. From the brain, yeah, from the Moichet Shabarosh. We're talking about the hair on the head. So it gets a unika, some nurture from the brain which is inside the skull, right? And therefore the Zohar says that the hair on the head represents something that's more essential than the hair of the beard. And that's the idea that she'in, they're more smooth, they're more soft. where there's a more tough texture, a harsher texture, a denser texture in the hairs of the beard. Keloimar, what does this mean spiritually? Shekulam b'chinas rachem and pshutim. The hair on the head represents complete empathy, compassion. Ki b'chinas galgalta atzma, because the skull itself, galgalta, the skull, which on top of the skull, that's where the hair grows from, the hair on the head, kuloi chesed v'toiv kiyadu, represents spiritually complete goodness and kindness. V'hainu, b'chinas chesed da'atik yoimin shemeir begalgalta. This represents the chesed of the state called atik yoimin, which is expressed in galgalta in the skull. Aval b'chinas cyrus the dikna, the hair of the beard is something else. The source of the concept of the hairs of the beard is to subdue the harsh judgments, ulam tikam, and to sweeten them, as one of the 13 attributes which is connected to the beard, which is noiseyav, and he lifts up sins. You can only sweeten negativity when you trace it back to its shirish. When you trace back din to its shirish, to its source, to its root, that's where you sweeten it. That's where you can transform it. That's where you can heal it. Al kein memela muven, shebchinas hasayris de dikne yesh b'mebchinas hagvuras. If the hairs of the beard represent the ability to transform, to be mamtik, to sweeten the gvuras, the harshness, that means they are the source of the gvuras. So that means yesh behem b'chinas hagvuras. V'amnam einam b'chinas gvuras mamish k'may gvuras shalamata nemshachim and amidus shu b'chinas tzimtzum v'din mamish and ekrayim gvuras. This is not literal gvuras like the lower gvuras which come from the midos, in which there is real tzimtzum, real restriction, real din, real harshness, mamish, shenekrayim gvuras, strength, severity. Elohim b'chinas gvuras memutakas b'chasad. The hairs of the beard are the concept of gvuras, the way they become sweetened through kindness. V'hainu shemamtikin kol din v'tzimtzum. That represents the Yud Gimel Midos Harachim, as we will see, Noiseyaven, which sweeten every din and tzimtzum, every harsh judgment. But if it sweetens it, it means it's the source of it, because all din gets sweetened when it's traced back to its source. Cyrus the Dikna is the source of the sweetening. Right. And it's the Shorish of Gvura, so it could sweeten the Gvura. The Galgalta, the hair on the head, on the cranium, represents Kuloi Chesed. That's the Gulgoylas, what he calls Chesed of Atik Yoimin. The hairs of the beard is already a source of Gvura, in which the lower Gvuras can get sweetened and transformed. And that's why this hair is soft and smooth, and this hair, the Zohar says, is not she'in, but it's tekifin. It has that harsher texture, the tougher bristle, I think it's called. Bristle, right? V'zeu sha'omar the tekifin inun. That's what the Zohar means in Idra Rabba, that it's tekifin. It's harsher. Pirush. B'klalus b'chinas chesed the gvura shabahan. Both the chesed and the gvura in these hairs, there's an intensity in both. The chesed comes with great strength. It's as white as a snow, which snow represents the most intense shade of white. Fleece. We have an halach when it comes to leprosy, as he said in the beginning of the Maimer, the highest level, the most intense shade of white is sheleg, snow. Fleece, white wool is not considered as white as snow. What's called white snow? Levushe. What's levushe? Cyrus the dikna, the hairs of the beard. Because of levushe kislag chiver, his garment is like white snow. Lefi sheboyim lahamtik dinin shalamata tzrichim lavka liyas betagboiris achsadim b'chsadim chazakim b'yois. Whenever you come to sweeten, to transform din, you have to have a much more intense state of chesed. When the chesed is just pure kindness, doesn't have to be so intense. But when you need to transform din, when you need to transform harshness, severity, judgment, You need a much deeper, more intense level of chesed. That's what the snow is, the white snow, the highest level, so to speak, the strongest shade of white representing chesed. Mashenkin Cyrus Harosh. But the hair of the head, Nikra Amar Noka, is called white wool. Amar is wool, Noka is clean, white, fleece. Ein Tzarich Lias Lavan Kesheleg. That doesn't have to be as white as snow. Fleece is enough. It's not coming to sweeten the harsh judgments. The hair of the head, unlike the hair of the beard, transcends the 13 attributes of compassion represented by the hair of the beard. As is known in the Zohar over there, before we start the 13 attributes, we first say, Vayaver Hashem al panav vayikra, Hashem, which according to the Zohar and the Arizal, Hashem is not part of the 13 attributes of compassion. It's the introduction. The 13 attributes begins with the word Keil, Rachum, V'chanon, Erech Hapayim, and then you have Rav Chesed and Emes, Noitzer Chesed La'alofim, Noisei Avoin, V'fesha V'chata. V'nake, so it starts with Keil, but before Keil you have Hashem, Keil Rachum V'chanon. Hashem, that transcends the Yidgim Tzarachamim. Shein Beis Pchines Peyes Harosh. Those are the two earlocks, the two peyes. Peya literally means a corner, right? When you trim a field, it says don't trim the whole field. Leave the pa'as sadcha, leave the corner. So the peyes is that remnant of hair that comes down, the two peyes of the head, that represents Havaya, Hashem. Before the Yud Gimel Midas Harachim, it will then lead into the beard, which represents the Yud Gimel Midas Harachimim. Shem Beis Pchines Peyes Shem Pchines Cyrus the Rosh. The peyes are called Peyes Harosh, they're part of the hair of the head. Shetluyin v'nimshachim lamata. It's the hair on the skull which now comes downward through the peyes. Umehem nimshach shoyrish amshachis yid gimel midas harachimim. And from the two peyes come the 13 attributes of mercy. K'maykel rachum chuli v'day lemevin. This will be enough for the one who understands. One of the fundamental teachings in Pnimius HaTorah, we spoke about this many times, is that the entire physical anatomy of a person, of a body, is not just physical and biological, it's really spiritual. What do we mean by spiritual? Yeah, mipsari echze leka, the passage says, for my flesh I will perceive godliness, or nasa adam betzalmenu kidmosenu. So every nuance, even a strand of hair, is reflective of a deep spiritual truth that's mirrored and manifested in the physical. Biology is really not just a study of biology, it's a study of spirituality. That's to be able to understand the full picture. Ad hayoim, for example, biologists wonder, what's the function of a beard? It's not so clear. The function of hair in different parts of the body is explained. Its purpose is to insulate, to protect the heat of the body, protect the scalp, the skull, and other. What's the benefit of a beard? And punkt in that place. Until today, they struggle and they argue with it from a purely evolutionary perspective. Yeah? Why would evolution want males to have beards? What does it do? So some argue that it makes you look more aggressive. So for survival, it makes you look more tough, more aggressive. Like, don't start up with me. So for survival, somehow, evolution liked the beard. Okay, it's different explanations that it still remains a mystery in many ways. Yeah. But that whole section in Zohar Parshas Nosai is really dedicated to the idea of Cyrus, what's called here. And I'll say briefly one of the points at least, and this is a little bit of I know it's new language, a little maybe also complex, but at least we'll get the general picture. In the structure of the Sephirot, meaning the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't just create the world, there were 10 building blocks which he used to create the world. They're called 10 Sephirot, 10 characteristics. Each soul is made up of those 10. Nasa Adam b'tzalma, just like Hashem, so to speak, emanated within his infinity, from within his infinity, 10 characteristics. Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, Malchus. Every soul is made up of these, like we speak in Sephirot Haimer about Chesed and Gvur and Tiferes, right? The seven Midas, and there's the 3 Chabad, Chachma, Bina, Das, and then there's the one above called the Keser. And it's really 10 because when you speak about Keser, you don't count Das. When you do Das, you don't count Keser. The Arizal says when you do Keser, you take away Das. There's a reason for it, but it's not for now. But it's basically the 10 characteristics called the 10 spheres. They're also reflected in the body. The Keser, the crown, is represented by the skull. The skull is literally the crown. It's not just a protective gear for the brain. The little mushy brain, like a jello inside the skull, has to be protected. The brain when you're born is 1 pound, and then when you grow older, a brain is usually, I think, 3 pounds, right? 2 or 3 pounds. And that brain, which is everything, the source of life, is protected by the skull. But the skull is not just a protection. The skull in Kabbalah is called a keser. It's called the crown. If the crown is not just a king wears a crown above the head. As we see in the Megillah, in many places, the crown in many ways represents the glory of the king. The king comes out to the nation with a crown. The keser malchus captures the glory, the honor of the king. In other words, it represents something that is even beyond the head. That's called keser. Then you have the brain itself, is the region of the right brain, chachma, the left brain, bina. In the last century, they started to speak a lot about the right brain and the left brain. Today, they love speaking about right brain people, left brain people. Yeah, right brain people who are more artistic and holistic and very good with imagination and inspiration, and left brain people who are more methodical and wordy and organized thinkers and so forth. Okay, some debate to how, if there's really such a difference, if in every person one is dominant over the other. It's a separate discussion. But the fact that when you identify the right brain, you see certain regions in the brain that are responsible for certain parts of life, and the left brain is responsible for other things, those are facts that we have discovered. But already the Zohar spoke about that Chachma is right brain, and Bina is left brain, and the difference of Chachma and Bina is Chachma is an epiphany, inspiration, and Bina is perspiration. One is Abba, one is Ima. So then you have Das, middle brain, that's called Das, Kavem Tzai. Then the Zohar says Chesed is associated with the right arm and Gvura, with the left arm and Tiferes, with the torso, Netzach with the right thigh, and Hod with the left thigh, and Yesod is associated with the bris. And then Malchus is associated sometimes with the mouth, and then when you get married, with your spouse. So each of these characteristics are associated with different parts of the brain. The skull, as I said, is called Keser. Keser is generally associated with Ratzon, which is above Chachma. Chachma is the conscious awareness. Keser is the will, the desire that is deeper than awareness. What do I mean deeper than awareness? Sometimes it could be completely unconscious. It's your innermost Ratzon. In Keser itself, there's 2 levels, Atik and Arich. Atik is associated with Tainuk. This is the way the Baal HaTanya understands it, based on the Arizal's teachings. And Arich is associated with Ratzon. Tainug is even deeper than Ratzon. Tainug is your deepest pleasures, which produces your deepest wills. Now, this is sometimes not something a person is conscious of. It can be completely unconscious, or what we call superconscious. Not subconscious, but better superconscious, probably because we're talking about Keser, above. Then there is Chachma. Chachma is a glimmer of awareness, which is already translated into ideas. Chachma Bina Das. Now, they used to think that the highest faculty in a person is reason. If I could reason with you, I can get anything done. Today, of course, the last 100 years, especially 50 years, everybody will laugh. Reason, really? How much of anybody's life is based on reason? If 5% of your life is based on reason, you're doing pretty well. Ratzon is where everything is at. Ratzon and Tainug, that's where everything is at. Okay. That's really the idea of Keser. Keser is higher than the brain. The skull is higher than the brain. So you have the skull. The skull itself has 2 states again, Atik and Arich. Atik is associated with Tainug, with pleasure. Arich is associated with Ratzon, desire. These are all higher than the brain, meaning above Chachma. In the physical anatomy, it's represented by the skull, and between the skull and the brain, there's a little space. There are basically 3 layers between the skull and the brain. I think they're called menings. Huh? Meninges, right? 3 layers, a membrane, one tougher layer, and then an innermost layer, a membrane, and then the lowest layer. It's a very little space, right? In Zohar, it's called Krume da Avira de Chafya al Reisha, which means the membrane of ear space that hovers over the brain itself. That space between the skull and the brain. Now, you're with me?
How do you say, what is Krumi again?
Krum is a membrane, krum, a membrane. Huh? Krume da'avir de chafya aresh. Now, each of these regions in the body are very, very deep. Today, science is coming to discover how every detail has within it layers and layers of significance, power, and potential that is mamish dazzling and incredible. I mean, just in the brain we have, right, 100 billion neurons. Not 10 neurons, not 100 neurons, not 1,000,000 neurons. 100 billion neurons. It's numbers that we don't... we're in a brain that weighs 1 pound when you're born. It's mind-staggering. That's 100 billion neurons. And those 100 billion neurons create 100 trillion connections. 100 trillion connections. You took all the computers in the world together, don't come close to the sophistication and intricacies of a brain. It's mavel al arayan. It's mamish astounding. And each detail, each prat is a reflection of a truth. It's a truth of the soul, mipsari echzel akav, godliness that is expressed in this physical feature. This is, the Zohar says, the secret of Cyrus, of here. Here is a paradox. On one hand, it's dead. On the other hand, it's alive. It grows. If you pull it, it hurts. But there's no nerves or blood cells in it. Here represents a hamshacha, a flow of energy that it becomes very, very restricted. Whenever you have to have a hamshacha of keser, keser is superconscious. It can't come out fully as is. It's too intense. That's what here is. Here captures the unconscious levels of energy, restricting them and contracting them through that little tiny tube. The hair looks like a little, what he calls a tzinor, a little channel, a little tube. He associates it with the letter vav, like a straw that contains energy from keser. That's why the first place where the hair grows is on the cranium, on the skull, keser, which is basically how the unconscious, superconscious dimensions of the human personality comes out in a revealed way through the hair on top of the head. Which is why here is very significant from a Jewish perspective, and has within it significant energy. When we say, Seir be'isha erva, the Gemara says, a woman when she's married covers her hair. Yeah. It's not an idea of, like some people think, that you want to curtail or suppress somebody. On the contrary, it's a recognition of the sensual, of the deep, intimate energy that sometimes here can have. And whenever you're dealing with deep, intimate energy, you need to protect it for yourself first and foremost. For yourself. For your own dignity, to be able to own yourself, to be able to have boundaries in which your intimate energy belongs to you. And then you choose when to share it, how to share it, with whom to share it. The Nazir has to let the hair grow. The Mitzayra, the leper, had to shave his hair. The Levium in the desert had to shave their hair. It says in Medrash, one of the reasons that Korach was so upset at Aaron. Korach was a Levi, had to shave. Aaron didn't. Aaron was a Kohen. Skan Aaron shayered al pi midosav. Korach didn't like it. It's one of the explanations of the Medrash. The Nazir, on the other hand, is not allowed to touch his hair. The hair on the head grows very, very long. So the skull, which is keser, it comes out in a very restricted and channeled way through the Seyar Sa'ar HaRosh. That's Sa'ar Reisha, the hair of the head. That's what the meaning of the pasuk. Atik Yoimin. Atik, you remember, is the deepest level of Keser. Sits, his garment is like white snow, and the hair of his head is like white fleece. Now the hair of the head, the hair on the skull, trickles down into the payas. And we have an Isur Lo Sakif Pas Roshcha. You're not allowed to circle your head and cut your payas. The payas have to be there, and the payas, so to speak, represent the channeling, the refiltering of the hair of the head downward. It starts making a journey downwards, to the jawbones, down to the cheeks. Those are the payas. The payas continue downward, and then you have the face, of course, and below it, under the chin, where the beard grows. That's called Cyrus the Dikna. So you have Sa'ar Reisha, the head, on the skull, and Dikna. Says the Zohar, what's the difference? The difference is in Keser, you have what we call Atik, Tainug. You have what's called Arich Ratzon. And then you have what's called Moichas Tima. Moichas Tima means literally the secret brain, or the unconscious brain, which is higher than Chachma. Chachma is when you have an epiphany. I got it. An idea. Where did the idea come from? That's called Moichas Tima. It was there. It was just you weren't conscious of it. The awareness was there. I just didn't have contact. What happened suddenly? An idea comes in. Where did the idea come from? The idea came from a place called Moichas Tima. That's unconscious. The unconscious brain. Stima, from the word sasim. Sasim, stima. It's plugged, it's concealed, it's blocked. That's called moichas stima. Or sometimes it's called chachma shebekeser. The way chachma is still in the state of keser, which represents the crown above that, which represents the superconscious. Comes the Zohar and says that the beard, which comes from the payas, represents Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. The 13 attributes of compassion is represented by the hair that grows in the beard. The two payas is Hashem, Hashem, and then you have Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna. Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna means the 13 sections of the beard, and the Zohar and the Arizal go through all the sections and demonstrate the relationship or map out the relationship between that section and a particular attribute of the Yom Midas HaRachamim, which, by the way, is the reason that even though halachically there are different heterim that some people use in order to touch their beard, from the Zohar and the Arizal's perspective, they advise very much against it because the beard represents the Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna, the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. So, for example, Hashem, Hashem are the two payas. Then you have Kale. Yeah. Kale represents the beginning of the beard right under the payas. Right under the payas, where it becomes a little more expansive. That's represented by the Shem Kale. I'll tell you what he says, it's quite interesting. The Zohar and the Arizal say, the Zohar said, the Arizal explains it more. Kale is right under the payas, Rachum on both sides. Rachum is the mustache. Chanun is the point right under the nose, the dent right under the nose. Erech is the hair under the lip. Apayim is in middle again, this space that parallels the point right up under the nose. Rav Chesed is the larger part of the beard, not right under the payas, but lower down the cheek till below the mouth. Emes, which is Tikkun Zayin. Emes is number 7. It's called Trein Tapuchin Kadishin, the 2 holy apples, which is without Cyrus. There's no hair over there. That's on the right and the left side of the nose, the cheeks themselves, the jawbones where there's no hair. Emes, there's no hair. There's no tzimtzum. Then you have Noitzer Chesed. Noitzer Chesed is number 8. And that's considered a full beard on the side of the face that a person sees already under the chin. The beard that grows. You'll have La'alofim. He says, are the smaller hairs that are absorbed in it, which is not visible. Noisei Avoin are the hairs that grow on the neck. V'fesha. He says a higher part of the neck and a lower part of the throat. V'chata is the mouth itself, again no hair. And then v'nake is the part of the bushy beard, but the back side, not the front side that is visible. This is called Yud Gimel Tikkunei Dikna. 13 tikkunim, 13 aspects of dikna of the beard, which represent Yud Gimel Midas HaRachma. That's why the Zohar says a lashon. It's a nice song they're singing. Wow. Das ist der Davenen und etwas anderes. Das sagt, es geht mit Stamme. Okay. So. Okay, so let's. The Zohar says that. I wanted to read the Lashon, but I don't see it right now. I have to look for it. Yeah. Part of the Gimel Tikkun Dikna are sections without hair. Like emes, like Tikkun emes. Like Tikkun emes, yeah. Yeah. And that's why, according to Teres HaKabbalah, Pnimis HaTorah, the beard was considered so significant, so holy, so sacred. Like the Zohar says, that one shouldn't touch the beard because it captures the flow of Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. The 13 attributes of compassion are manifested through the beard. Now, what does this mean? What, here? Like here? It's here. It's physical here. But based on the idea of what we explained, what is here? Here is the channeling of very, very intense energy that can't come out in full revelation. It comes out through Cyrus. Cyrus represents the ultimate symptom, the ultimate restriction and filtering and condensing of the energy, that only a minute part of it comes out because it's such a high level, it's such a high state. If it would come out as is, unfiltered, it would be overwhelming. The unconscious Kesser doesn't just come out, it comes out through the Cyrus, through the here. So there's the Cyrus on the skull, the cranium, and then there's the Cyrus Hadikna, the Cyrus of the beard. Says the Zohar, the Cyrus of the here, now we could understand is She'in, is soft. Cyrus of the beard is Tkifin, is strong. Ayit Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. So it says that's the Vart. Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim are all here to transform dinim, to transform gvuras. For example, you have noisei avoin, over al pesha, right? Erech hapayim, rav chesed ve'emes, noisei avoin v'chesed v'chatav v'nakez. He gives an example of a noisei avoin. All dinim, all negativity is always sweetened when it goes back to the source. For example, in a person's life, if you're very, very upset about something, or very hurt by something, or something really sits in you, and it's very hard to deal with it. But usually, if you could go back to the source of it, ein hadinim nimtakim ela b'sharshan. Their dinim will become sweetened. Very often in psychology, this is the process, at least to a certain degree. If you could take a person back to the origin of the hurt, of the pain, of the trauma, that's where you can undo a lot of things. Because what happens is, we grow an infection. We grow an infection on the original wound, and we grow layers and layers and layers and layers, and then the layers become most important, but really it's all an outgrowth of an original reality. If you can go back to the core, over there things could be sweetened. So all gvura is nimtak b'sharsha, it's sweetened in the source. So Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, which is represented by the Yud Gimel Tikkun Dikna, this is the shirish of Gvura, the way Gvura is in its source, and therefore it could sweeten it.
Well, that's what you said 3 or 4 days ago. Suicide is just the outcome of poor choices.
Right. Well, we said that addiction is not the problem, addiction is the solution, meaning for the person, this is the solution for his pain. Yeah. So it's hard to go back to the source. But that's where all sweetening happens. Gvura is sweetened in a shirish. So there's 2 types of hairs. The Cyrus of the skull represents the hamshach of what he calls chesed of Atik Yoimen, a pure chesed. The skull is represented by kulei toiv. That's why it's called white. That's why it's kamar naka, like white fleece. The chesed that comes out in the Cyrus of the dikna of the beard are compared to snow, which is more white because it has to transform. It has to sweeten the gvura. It's the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. The toupee is transcends the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. That's Hashem, Hashem, before Kael. And then the two payas come down into the beard, which is represented by Kel Racham V'chan Erech Hapayim. And the two payas is the refiltering of the hair on the head. The hair on the head represents the flow, the restricted flow from the world of Keser, from the world of Atik. That's what happens by the skull, that hair. And then that hair is refiltered through the payas down to the beard, which is Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna. That's why, in the beginning of the Maimed, the Baal HaTanya said, that Chesed of Atik Yoimin is expressed in the skull of Arich Ampin, which is white. And Gvura of Atik Yoimin is expressed in the Moichas Timah of Arich Ampin, in the secret brain of Arich Ampin, which comes out in the Peyas and then in the Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna. Atik itself remains completely above. But the chesed of Atik Yoimin comes out in the skull, and that's the hair on the cranium. And the gvura of Atik Yoimin, which is already a concept called gvura, that comes out in what's called moichas timah of Arich Ampin, not the skull. Moichas timah is already the brain, which the brain comes down lower. The skull is around the brain, and then you have the brain which comes down all the way down to the stem of the brain, which will lead to the spinal cord, and that comes out in the hair of the beard. So the hair of the beard represents the gvura of Atik Yoimin, which transforms the gvuras below. The gvuras below is the way the gvura gets distorted, the way the pain gets distorted. The gvura of Atik Yoimin is the gvura in the source, in the superconscious force, the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, which transforms the gvura, and that's why it has to be such an intense level of chesed. It has to be like white snow, because it has to transform the negativity. Whenever you have to transform negativity, you need a much deeper level of rachamim, a much deeper level of chesed, a much deeper level of empathy. That's why it's like white snow, which is much more powerful. So therefore you have Cyrus Harosh, which are called She'iyin, soft. As he puts it here, Atik Yoimin, Kulei Rachem and V'chesed. It's the skull of Arich Ampin. Atik remains completely above, removed. But Arich Ampin, which is Ratzon, comes out in the skull. The Chesed of Atik Yoimin comes out in the skull. And then the Gvura of Atik Yoimin comes out in the secret brain, Moichas Timah, which is represented in the lower hairs. There's the higher hair on top of the head, on top of the skull, the cranium here. And then there's the payas, which is already bringing that flow downward from the world of Ratzon, from the world of Galgalta, into the world of Moichin, right? It comes down lower into the world of Moichin, Moichas Timah, Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, and that's the lower level of the hair, which is why we never destroy the payas, because the payas represents that sacred flow from the higher to the lower, and then it comes into the beard, into Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna. Okay, I think this will be mafsek. He'll continue tomorrow.